Ladies and gentlemen, let's face a brutal truth. Life isn't fair. But what's even worse than unfairness is the chaotic unpredictability of human relationships. When you finally break free from someone after the tumult of a messy connection, you think you've escaped the storm. You think it's over. But as you begin to rebuild, something strange happens. He'll test you. And when it happens, it's not about you. It's about him. It's about his unresolved need to gauge your strength, your resolve, and most importantly, your ability to maintain boundaries in a world that has none. Now, you might ask, why would anyone, after months or even years of no contact, come back into your life with such a test? Why would he send a message or reach out only to dangle half a conversation in front of you, knowing full well that it's a test? It's because fundamentally he needs to reassess the foundation of the dynamic that once existed between you two. He needs to know if you've maintained your boundaries or if you've become just as malleable, just as susceptible as you were before. And the only way to know that, unfortunately, is to test you. It's uncomfortable, it's unfair, and yet it's part of the game of human interaction. When someone reaches out after a period of no contact and begins to test you, it's crucial to understand that this behavior is not about you, it's about them. This can be a difficult truth to grasp because in the moment it might feel personal. You might wonder, why now? What does this mean? Did I do something wrong? Or does this mean something positive? But the reality is that this testing, this probing, stems from their own internal struggles, not your actions or worth. At its core, this behavior is a reflection of unresolved feelings, insecurities, or a need for control. When someone tests you, they are trying to answer questions for themselves. It's rarely about the quality of the connection you once shared, or even who you are today. Instead, it's about their own perception of the dynamic that existed between you and the role you played in their life. Whether consciously or unconsciously, they are seeking to validate something for themselves. Can they still reach you? Are you still the same person who will respond the way you used to? Do they still hold power or influence over you? These are the questions that drive this kind of behavior, and they're rooted entirely in their psyche, not yours. What's important to understand is that this testing is a reaction to their inability to fully process the no understander period. When you step back from someone, especially if the connection was emotionally charged or significant, it disrupts the narrative they've created about themselves and the relationships. People often rely on relationships, romantic, platonic, or otherwise, to affirm their sense of self. When you remove yourself from their life, it forces them to confront parts of themselves they may not want to see. This is uncomfortable and can lead to feelings of doubt, insecurity, or even a sense of loss of control. Testing you, in this context, becomes a way for them to regain some sense of certainty or reassurance. This behavior also speaks to the human tendency to seek validation. When someone tests you, they're often looking for an external answer to an internal question. They want to know if they still matter, if they're still in control, or if they can still evoke a reaction from you. It's not about your feelings or your growth, it's about satisfying their own emotional needs. In many cases, they're not even fully aware of why they're doing it. It's a subconscious response to the discomfort they feel in the silence or distance. Understanding that this testing is about them, not you, is liberating. It allows you to see their actions for what they are, a reflection of their inner world, not an indictment of your values. It's not your job to resolve their insecurities or provide them with the validation they seek. Recognizing this dynamic empowers you to respond or not respond in a way that aligns with your boundaries and self-respect. By viewing the test through this lens, you can remain grounded in your growth and protect the peace you've worked so hard to create. Relationships are rarely static. They exist in a constant state of flux, shaped by time, experience, and the emotional development of the individuals involved. When no contact is established, it may feel like the dynamic between two people has been frozen, as though everything has stopped and will remain exactly as it was. However, this isn't the case. Even in silence, relationships continue to evolve, but often in ways that are unpredictable and difficult to control. The period of no contact becomes a fertile ground for change, introspection, and, paradoxically, the reemergence of unresolved emotions. For the person who initiates contact after a long absence, the relationship is not over. It has simply shifted into a new phase. No contact can create a sense of restlessness for them, a feeling that something is incomplete or left unresolved. This can lead to the urge to test the waters, to check whether the dynamics have truly changed or if they can reassert some level of influence or familiarity. The silence does not create clarity for them. Instead, it often amplifies their uncertainty. They may begin to wonder what you're thinking, whether you've moved on, or whether the connection between you still holds any weight. The testing that occurs after no contact is their way of attempting to regain a sense of equilibrium, even if it disrupts yours in the process. It's important to recognize that relationships, even in their absence, continue to live in the minds of the individuals who are part of them. Memories, interpretations, and emotions linger, and people project their own narratives onto what once existed. When someone reaches out to test you, it's often because they've built a story about the relationship during the no hath bear period, a story that may or may not align with reality. They might idealize the connection, downplay its challenges, or question whether the distance was truly necessary. Testing you becomes a way for them to validate or challenge the version of events they've constructed in their mind. This dynamic underscores the fact that no contact is rarely a clean break. Even if one party has moved on, the other might still be caught in the gravitational pull of what once was. The silence can be misinterpreted as weakness, uncertainty, or an invitation to reestablish the old dynamic. This is why testing often feels like a step backward, because for the person reaching out, it is. They are seeking to recreate the familiarity of a past connection in a present that may no longer accommodate it. Understanding that relationships are rarely static helps you see the broader picture. The testing isn't just an isolated action, it's part of the natural ebb and flow of human connections, especially when one party resists closure. Recognizing this allows you to approach the situation with clarity and control. You can acknowledge their behavior as a response to their own narrative without letting it disrupt the growth and peace you've cultivated during no contact. It reminds you that while the relationship may evolve, your boundaries and progress must remain steadfast. When someone tests you after a period of no contact, it's often driven by their need for validation. This need is deeply rooted in human nature, our desire to feel significant, in control, and seen by others. For the person reaching out, testing you becomes a way to seek reassurance about their place in your life and ultimately their own sense of self-worth. This behavior is rarely about rekindling the connection or addressing unresolved issues. Instead, it is an attempt to answer a nagging question. Do I still matter? During no contact, the lack of interaction can leave someone feeling uncertain and unsettled. They might begin to question how much influence they still have over you or whether they've been forgotten. This doubt can be unsettling for someone who is accustomed to validation from external sources, especially if they once held a position of emotional significance in your life. Testing you becomes a way for them to regain a sense of control by confirming whether you're still emotional. A response, whether positive or negative, provides that validation, reassuring them that they haven't been entirely displaced from your thoughts or life. This need for validation can also stem from insecurity. When a person feels uncertain about themselves or their choices, they often look outward for affirmation. Testing you may be less about the relationship you shared and more about their internal struggle to feel important or valued. Is an attempt to reestablish their own self-esteem by seeing if they can still elicit a reaction from you, if they can provoke a response. Whether it's anger, interest, or even indifference, it confirms their relevance in your emotional landscape. The challenge for you is to recognize this behavior for what it is, an attempt to satisfy their own emotional needs. Their actions are not a reflection of your worth, your growth, or your progress. This understanding is crucial because it allows you to detach from their need for validation and avoid getting drawn back into a cycle of responding to their tests. When you recognize that their behavior is about them, not you, it becomes easier to maintain your boundaries, protect your emotional well-being, and prioritize your personal growth. You don't need to provide validation for someone else's insecurities. Your focus should remain on your own journey forward. When someone tests you after a period of no contact, it creates a pivotal moment for you. a chance to solidify the growth you've achieved during the separation. No contact is often a deliberate choice made to create distance, heal wounds, and regain clarity. During this time, you likely invested effort into rediscovering yourself, setting boundaries, and prioritizing your emotional well-being. When the test comes, it's not just about their actions, but about your response. This is the moment to demonstrate that your progress is not superficial, but deeply rooted and transformative. Growth, particularly after a difficult or emotional relationship, is hard-earned. It requires reflection, honesty, and the ability to confront uncomfortable truths about yourself and your interactions. You may have worked to identify patterns that no longer serve you, habits that undermine your self-worth, or behaviors that kept you tethered to unhealthy dynamics. These realizations are powerful, but they only become meaningful when they're put into practice. The test is the ultimate opportunity to show yourself that you've moved beyond those old patterns and can now act in alignment with the person you've become. Responding to a test in a way that reflects your growth often means resisting the temptation to engage in old dynamics. It's easy to fall back into familiar roles, to seek validation, or to hope for a different outcome than what the past has shown. But doing so risks undoing the progress you've made. This moment is about staying true to the boundaries and values you've established during the Noahic period. It's about recognizing that your growth is not contingent on someone else's approval or understanding, but is a reflection of your own inner strength and commitment to change. This test, while uncomfortable, is also an opportunity. It allows you to affirm that you are no longer the person you were when the relationship ended. It challenges you to remain grounded in your self-worth and to trust the work you've done to heal and grow. Whether you choose to respond or remain silent, your actions in this moment should align with the version of yourself that you've been striving to build. Passing this test isn't about proving anything to them. It's about proving to yourself that your growth is real, lasting, and unshakable. The power of boundaries is one of the most essential lessons to embrace when dealing with someone who tests you after no contact. Boundaries are not just about keeping others at a distance. They're about defining the terms of your self-respect, emotional health, and personal growth. As with all, they serve as a framework for how you allow others to treat you and, more importantly, how you treat yourself. When someone tests you, they're essentially probing those boundaries to see if they hold firm or if they can be crossed. This moment becomes a direct reflection of your ability to stand by the standards you've set for yourself. Establishing boundaries during or after no contact is often a critical part of the healing process. It's about identifying what behaviors you will no longer tolerate, what actions you need to protect your peace, and what values you refuse to compromise on. When someone reappears to test you, it's not just a challenge to your external limits, but also to your internal resolve. If your boundaries are strong, this test becomes an opportunity to reaffirm your growth and your commitment to yourself. People test boundaries for various reasons: curiosity, control, insecurity, or even an unconscious need to revisit the dynamics of the past. When they test you, they may be looking for a way to re-enter your life under the same terms as before, hoping that you haven't changed or grown enough to resist. It's not always malicious, but it is disruptive. Allowing someone to overstep your boundaries, even once, can undermine the progress you've made and reopen wounds that you've worked hard to heal. This is why it's critical to enforce your boundaries firmly and consistently. It's not about being cold or dismissive. It's about honoring yourself and the work you've done. Enforcing boundaries sends a clear message, not just to them, but to yourself, that your well-being is non-negotiable. Whether you choose to ignore their test, respond briefly but assertively, or cut off contact entirely, the key is to ensure that your response aligns with your values and protects your peace. Boundaries are a declaration of self-worth. When someone tests you after no contact, it's a chance to show that your boundaries are not just words, they are actions. By standing firm, you reinforce the idea that you are no longer defined by past dynamics, but by the strength and clarity you've gained. One of the greatest challenges of being tested after no contact is resisting the emotional trap that the situation can present. When someone who once held significance in your life suddenly reaches out, it's easy to feel a surge of emotions: curiosity, nostalgia, hope, or even doubt. These feelings can pull you into a cycle of overthinking and second-guessing your progress. However, It's critical to recognize this for what it is: an emotional trap that threatens to derail the growth and peace you've worked hard to achieve. The test often comes disguised as something harmless, a message, a gesture, or an attempt at casual conversation. It might even feel like a door to closure or a chance to rekindle something meaningful. But more often than not, these actions are designed to provoke a response, to draw you back into the dynamic you left behind. The risk lies in mistaking this test for an opportunity to resolve the past, when in reality it's often a way for the other person to reassert their presence in your life. This trap is less about reconciliation and more about disrupting the balance you've created during the period of no contact. Engaging in this dynamic can reopen old wounds, reignite patterns you've worked to break, and even undo some of the progress you've made. The emotional trap is powerful because it appeals to the human tendency to seek validation, closure, or connection. But falling into it often leads to disappointment and frustration, as it places your emotional well-being in the hands of someone who may not have your best interests at heart. Resisting this trap requires clarity and It means reminding yourself of why no contact was necessary in the first place, and trusting that the growth you've experienced is more valuable than any fleeting interaction. It's about recognizing that closure doesn't always come from others. It comes from within. By staying grounded in your progress and prioritizing your peace, you can avoid being pulled into the emotional chaos of the past. So ultimately, the test is not a measure of your ability to re-engage, but of your strength to walk away. By resisting the trap, you demonstrate that your worth is no longer tied to external validation or unresolved dynamics. Instead, it is rooted in the self-respect and growth you've cultivated.